All right, everybody, how we doing? Sorry, guys, was just welcome to this YouTube Live, everybody. Here, Monday, October 28th. We were just trying to figure out the chat section because the last couple times had some issues with the chat section. Some type of bug was just crawling around there, so it wasn't working correctly, but it seems to be working now. So we're up and running. So thanks for your patience, everybody. How we doing, guys? If you're ladies, gents, if you guys are tuning into this live, I would love to know where you guys are tuning in from. Where in the world are you guys watching this from if you are watching it live? And you can also let me know in the chat section if you guys are watching the replay of this, where are you guys tuning in from? How you guys doing? What's alive in your space, everybody? So just want to let everyone know who is watching this that you're always welcome to just ask me questions in the chat section, to put anything in the chat section, anything you're curious about, any questions that you might have, and I would be happy to answer them. Yeah, the energy is crazy. I have like so much energy in my like midsection right now, like my stomach, my gut, my lower back, and it feels like it's just like this crazy sort of like log jam with all the energy, where it's like I can literally see the energy is trying to move down, but it's like too much energy. You know, it's like, you guys know like a French press, like when you have a French press, like that's energetically what it feels like in my body with the energy that's trying to come through. It's like too much energy, and there's just not enough space. So it kind of just creates this big fucking log jam. And I feel it's holding kind of in my kind of like bladder, stomach, lower back, solar plexus, just a lot of energy. It's just like fucking wanting to move down, and it's just not really able to right now. Because the energy is crazy, guys. The type of shit that we're accessing right now is just we're in this crazy, crazy portal. So let me know how you guys are doing. Let me know how you guys are doing. Are you guys surviving? Are you guys thriving? Are you guys what's alive in your guys' space right now? Let me know in the chat section, guys. What's alive in your space? Send me your questions. Send me your questions. I'm definitely going to begin to do some more Q&As with this live stream. I think just where I'm answering on people's questions, where I just kind of ask questions beforehand. I think I'm going to do one of those soon. So again, guys, just while I kind of roll along here, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat section. Let me know how you guys are doing, and I can kind of riff off anything you kind of bring to the table. I was going to chat about sacred union today, and kind of this idea of like healing polarity in the ancestral realm. Because we've been in this crazy portal, you guys, for September and October, right? So the past 2 months. And I remember it really, really swiftly and abruptly when kind of this portal kind of came about. And it really does feel there is a lot of trying to harmonize with masculine, feminine energy. There's a lot of trying to harmonize with masculine, feminine energy, and trying to do so at like a real collective level, and trying to do so at like a real generational level. Because if you think about it, with all this energy, look at my fucking hair. Jesus Christ. Maybe we're not going to go with the hood. But if you think about it, guys, how much generational energy that we're accessing right now, crazy levels of generational and ancestral energy that we're accessing in our body, we're having to sort of move through in our body, right? We're having to go through these processes individually to be able to move all this energy through. And basically, so what's happening as we move through all this energy is we're actually having to heal what I call ancestral polarity within ourselves. So what that basically means is through our body, through the balance with our left and right sides of our body, we're having to create our own sort of homeostasis, our own sort of balance, our own sort of rewiring and restructuring with the masculine and feminine energy in our lineage. And we're having to do that through our body, right? And so what that basically means is that with how the maternal and the paternal ancestors interact through our flesh, because that's what's happening, right? Ancestral energy comes down through the crown. The left and right sides are trying to work to find a balance. Left side, obviously, being the feminine, right side, the masculine, and they're trying to find a balance. And so we're trying to heal some of the wounding between the masculine and feminine in our lineage, in our body, right? And so that is a big part of what's been happening the past couple months, right? Because when we're dealing with a lot of ancestral energy, we are dealing with the balance between feminine and masculine, right? And for example, me being this masculine guy with a masculine core, so what's going to happen in my body is that I'm going to have to try and kind of course correct the wounding with the masculine and feminine in my lineage through my body. And so that's that's a huge part, because when we go through these initiations, these spiritual initiations, is about so many things, and a big part of it is about trying to harmonize the masculine and feminine, which is going to involve so much sort of relational repatterning and re-imprinting in our body, and so the left and right are trying to sort of counterbalance together in our body, and so this all happens with energy coming down through the crown. Energy comes down through the crown and it tries to find a balance between the left and right sides of our body. When we eventually do kind of begin to find this balance, I call this the cathedral, where we're basically sort of channeling our own sort of divine feminine and divine masculine energy, right? And this is kind of this cathedral where the crown is bursting wide open. Our field is really expansive. And we've basically begun to heal a lot of the wounding between the masculine and feminine in our lineage. Because if you think about just in your lineage, right? So like when we work with polarity, okay, how do I get in my feminine? How do I get in my masculine? But when we're dealing with it in the ancestral realm, we're dealing with like all the abuse, all the generational abuse. We're dealing with, all the times it wasn't safe for men to be in their power, or men were, weren't allowed from the women, or were emasculated by the women. So we're dealing with all these different pieces in our body. And so as I've talked about, we're dealing with like ancestral unworthiness. We're dealing with all these sort of generational contracts. And a big part of that is the masculine and feminine. And what we also will be picking up right now as we've been going through this portal is a lot of just the collective wounding. The collective wounding, if you're a man, if you have a masculine core, you're going to be experiencing a lot of the collective wounding around the masculine. If you're a woman and you have a divine feminine core, you're going to be feeling a lot of the collective wounding around your feminine. We're having to try and heal this in our body, because ultimately what's trying to happen is that the world moves into more of a harmonized kind of homeostasis and balance when we're able to channel really healthy imprints of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And that's a big part of what's trying to happen in sort of the collective field, is we're trying to really heal the poles, the magnetic poles of polarity, the divine feminine, divine masculine. Everything is made up of masculine and feminine energy, and we're trying to heal these poles in sort of the collective field, right? Which is why there's a lot of people who are really being called right now who have really like strong archetypes, like ancient archetypes of the masculine and the feminine. And what I mean by that is that there's going to be a lot of feminine and male oracles who are basically going to be called to embody divine feminine codes and divine masculine codes. For example, a big part of my purpose, or a part of my purpose, is to channel and bring divine masculine codes to the collective. Because as if I were to explain to you my masculine energy, it's kind of a different masculine energy, right? I have a very, very primal masculine essence, but I'm also like a male oracle, which means that I access a lot of fucking energy, a lot of ancient energy, which is a lot different than if you walk into a men's group and it's kind of this, anchored stoicism. It's a lot different than that, right? Because my body's accessing just so much different energy, right? And so a lot of people let's say, men who are really pragmatic would think of this as like a feminine energetic, but it's actually just a new paradigm of masculinity. It's a new paradigm of masculinity, which this is what I equate to the divine masculine. I equate the divine masculine as when we're accessing masculine codes that expand beyond our lifetime. Masculine energy, like stepping into your masculine, is just working in this lifetime. Working in the divine masculine is working in like the ancient lineages, Coming into your feminine is just working in this lifetime. Coming into your divine feminine is working in the ancient sort of lineages. And so for me, I've been really on this like crazy journey of learning how to like anchor this energy that I'm accessing, because it's relentless and it doesn't fucking stop. And because of just, I have a really old soul, so my body's accessing all this energy. And so a part of my purpose is to really bring these divine masculine codes and also just begin to anchor in this new paradigm of masculinity, which is really, really different. And so the divine masculine is basically like you have this primal masculine core, but he's also like an oracle. When I say an oracle, meaning that his body is tapped into a process of accessing ancient codes, right? Accessing these sort of divine codes in his body, right? So that's basically like a male oracle, has a primal masculine core, but is accessing these ancient codes through his body. So the amount of masculine energy that he's trying to work in a capacity of, he's probably working in thousands of years. Worth of energy that is now trying to be channeled through his body. That's how I feel in my experience, which is amazing, but it's also been extremely challenging. And it kind of goes against the grain a little bit of what we perceive normal masculinity to be, which is like just very anchored. You think of a guy like an immovable rock, like he just kind of there, but like when you are working in thousands of years worth of energy, that really shifts that process because you're accessing so much energy. And so it's just a whole new paradigm of masculinity that we're trying to anchor. And this has been both amazing and extremely challenging for me. And this is so different than the sort of traditional masculine energy, like when you go into like a men's group. And so these divine feminine oracles, right, are the same thing, working in thousands of years worth of ancient energy. It's basically two really, really old souls that have kind of moved into this process in their bodies of beginning to channel and access these ancient codes and beginning to lock these ancient codes. And they're beginning to ground and anchor hundreds and thousands of years worth of energy in their body, which is ultimately trying to heal and trying to restore the homeostasis and balance in the sort of the collective field with the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And I've been on this crazy fucking journey where of like learning this process and learning what is sacred union and what is not sacred union. I remember I got into a relationship in the beginning of 2021, and it was like that type of connection. You're like, I've known them from another lifetime. I feel like I've known them forever, like the craziest fucking soul connection you could ever imagine. And we basically went on this crazy sort of shamanic journey together for a few years. And at the time when I entered that relationship, I was like, oh, this is sacred union. I get it. Like, this is sacred union, just based off the soul connection, just everything. I was like, this is sacred union. And then I learned, I was like, oh no, that was a karmic spiritual relationship. That wasn't sacred union. And the relationship I experienced was very much kind of like a twin flame type relationship, even though I hate that shit, but it was kind of, and what I actually realized was in the rupture of that relationship, I actually got put onto the path of beginning to really go through the process of preparing for the timeline of sacred union. And I feel so much in the spiritual space, particularly, let's say, with the ungrounded spiritual community, they basically associate sacred union to kind of be that karmic spiritual relationship. You know, the twin flames, that connection where you've seen each other from another lifetime, a past life, and they associate this to be sacred union. But I've kind of learned that we kind of have to go through a process, and this is what I call in my work, like the big attachment rupture that we need to go through, which is essentially you're experiencing an attachment rupture from the generational sort of past life realm that basically requires you to like totally recalibrate and re-imprint what you associate the divine to be. And what I've learned is people who are actually called onto this path, it just depends on what your soul's calling is. I know for me that I am being asked to go through the gauntlet of all of this shit in the deepest possible, purest way, where I can't cheat any sort of system. And I'm being asked to go through the gauntlet to like literally embody these codes for myself as a teacher, but just for my soul's path here on earth. That I know that I'm having to totally walk the gauntlet to prepare for sacred union. And so I had to go through that experience of finding connection where I'm like, oh, this is sacred union, only to realize, no, that was more of my like spiritual ego. That was more of my spiritual codependency. That was more of like looking for a relationship with too much sort of fantasy, right? Too much sort of deliverance and looking for a relationship to deliver you, right? And so in the rupture of that, what it essentially has brought up is my like deepest unworthiness. And it's been almost 2 years since we split up. So I've been on this journey for a long time of going through the unraveling process, like facing my deepest unworthiness, facing the deepest sort of layers of my inner love addict, the ways where I would look for a relationship to save me, or I look for a relationship to deliver me to this like spiritual experience, right? And I think so much of the spiritual industry associates what I actually see as the karmic spiritual relationship as sacred union. So everyone talks about divine love, sacred union. And I think people experience union at different varying degrees, dependent on your soul's incarnation here on earth. And so what I mean by that is that with people who really have to go through a process, myself included, of learning so many fucking lessons of like, oh, I thought this was it. And having to learn those lessons, you're actually being prepared and you're being primed for the process of this gauntlet of coming into your own sort of archetypal codes in your body, divine feminine, divine masculine. And so when someone just like finds a relationship pretty quickly and it just kind of works and stuff, they're not really being primed for these archetypal codes, right? Because we have to learn so many lessons of what is not. And so when we have a really, really old soul, it means we have to go through so many karmic lessons, because that soul is trying to go through its process of anchoring and grounding fully down into the flesh. And the way that we go through that process is having to go through so much varying degrees of karma. And so if you're someone who's had a real difficult relational path of having to learn really difficult relational lessons, it's very possible that you're being really, really called into these archetypal sort of codes that are being called forward to sort of heal the collective and harmonize the divine feminine, divine masculine. And just what that means is that you're going to have to go through such an immense process in your body of having to restore and balance the feminine and the masculine in your lineage through your flesh. And the way that's going to be manifested is through relational heartbreak, through relational learning, through going on these journeys in love and relationships of thinking this was going to be the one that was going to be the everything, and then not having that work out, and then having to go back to the space of like relearning. Because when I went through this rupture with this person who I thought was my sacred union, eventually probably in the middle of the relationship, I learned, I was like, oh, this is more of like a karmic spiritual relationship rather than sacred union, which just meant that there was more that I had to go on my path and my preparation for sacred union. And basically where I see myself on the path is I'm in the total like preparation stages for sacred union. And but when I experienced that rupture, it was like I didn't know anything anymore. I was like, all my spiritual understanding was basically around sort of this relationship working out. I basically was like, I don't know what God is if this doesn't work out. I don't know what my work is if this doesn't work out. And so it was this real rupture of like every part of my identity and understanding and how I contextualize and formatted things was around, oh, yeah, like this is your person, right? Like this is the situation. And then I went through that rupture and that learning at such an immense degree. And I was like, oh, now I actually understand what God is. Now I actually understand what the divine is. And it totally reincarnated what my work was, and now basically downloaded the imprint of sort of my work that I now teach as a spiritual teacher, and this path of moving into God and moving into the divine, because I thought this relationship was it. And then when that ruptured, it was like experiencing an attachment rupture from another lifetime. It was like experiencing an attachment rupture from hundreds of years. And it was the gnarliest fucking thing, having to go through my body of that experience. But that was the thing that really began to open my crown. That was the experience that really, really began to open my crown. So when that rupture from that relationship didn't work, look at the fucking orbs, you guys. Holy shit. That means my crown's fucking buzzing. Look at the orbs. Holy shit. Look at that, eh? So when I experienced this attachment rupture, that's really when my crown started to open. That's actually when my crown started to open. You know, if you think about it, right, what's not going to allow your crown to open is that you're still operating in some level of ego that is blocking you from fully opening to the divine, from fully opening to God. This is why I see so much of like twin flames and these karmic spiritual relationships, which so many people in the spiritual industry will say this is divine union. I don't think that at all. I think it's actually pre-divine. But not everyone is meant to go through a process of truly coming into sacred union. Not everyone is meant to go down that path to the extreme that I'm talking about here. I know I am. That's what I was called to for whatever reason, and that's the process that I've been going through. And so when that relationship that you're like, oh my God, this is my person, like the soul connection is fucking crazy. When that doesn't work out, now all of a sudden, all the ways your spiritual ego was getting involved begins to dissipate. It begins to eradicate. And now the crown can finally open. And what it really feels like, you guys, is you're in a space where you have no idea. You have no idea where to go next. The field is so fucking open. Like you could do anything. And so it's almost like the ways that you try to create an identity through your ego and understanding, a way you formatted the world is now gone. A way you understood the world is now gone. And this is what I call the attachment rupture, which is how we realign and recalibrate our attachment system to what I call the God attachment system, which is at first what it feels like is you're so lost. You have no idea what's going on. You thought things were going to be a certain way, and then they didn't work out that way. And this is why people who are really called into archetypal codes of divine feminine, divine masculine need to go through an experience. You guys, look at the fucking orbs. That's coming from my crown being so open. If we're called to embody these archetypal codes, it means that we're probably going to have an experience where we thought something was going to be one way, and then it kind of gets ruptured. It kind of gets blasted open. Maybe we have to go through like a bunch of experiences like that. And the reason being is that God and spirit is trying to totally align your body to the deepest truth and connection to spirit so that you can actually download your code. You can download your archetypal divine masculine, divine feminine codes. And so when you go through this rupture and you don't know what's happening, you're like, fuck, I don't know where to go next. I don't know where I'm supposed to live. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. And then now what's happening is your body's trying to totally aligned to spirit. And the way that you operate and move through the world is totally connected to spirit, and totally connected to spirit and not an egoic way. Before the rupture is typically where we're connected to spirit in an egoic way. Think about someone who's all about twin flames and you tell them twin flames don't exist and they like literally want to kill you. That's the same thing like if you tell like a born again Christian that like I don't believe in God. There's so much ego trying to extort a sense of safety and extort a sense of understanding and formatting and contextualizing a way that we view the world, that when that is questioned, it brings up so much fear. It brings up so much fear. And when that's the case, our crown's not actually open. This is why so many people in the spiritual industry that talk about divine union, their crowns are not actually open in a way that's connected to their root. And so when you go through this rupture where you're like, fuck, like I thought it was going to be one way and all of a sudden I was wrong. And now you're actually recalibrating to a process of truly aligning to God. But you have to start from a blank canvas where all of a sudden, everything you thought was going to be one way, that's gone. And now you're having to like reestablish what you associate spirit to be, God, the process of God. And essentially just what that was doing, it was revealing the work that you still had to do within yourself to prepare for sacred union. And if you were someone who really is truly called to like archetypal divine masculine, divine feminine codes, you're going to have to go through so many ego deaths in order to get to the place where you download your codes, more than the average person. And relationships and relational ruptures, relational breakups, heartbreak are one of the greatest ways that we begin to come into more of our codes, because we're having to look at every single place that we're not in wholeness, that we're not in sovereignty within ourselves, right? We're having to look, where is the masculine and feminine in our own body, in our own lineage out of balance? Where at a generational level am I still having to move this energy through my body? And so when we're called to these archetypal codes, we have to go through such an intense, extreme process of coming into the embodiment and integration of these codes. Such an intense process, you guys. And in doing so, that's the preparation for sacred union. Because when we move into sacred union, it's going to be two people that are totally sovereign and whole in their beings. It's actually going to be two people that have experienced this really big attachment rupture. They've experienced this rupture where their spiritual ego has been like sort of decimated. Their spiritual ego, which often means a pretty substantial heartbreak and breakup that required them to purge a level of attachment trauma from like a generational realm, which is this process I'm talking about that truly opens the crown, right? Because now what's happening is you're having to look every single place in your life that is getting in the way of your relationship to spirit. Everywhere in your life that is getting in the way of your relationship to spirit. Think about when people like go through a breakup, right? We always try to find the next relationship. We have all these ways that are battling against unworthiness or our fear of being alone or whatever it might be, right? And when we go through that rupture, we're being asked to like recalibrate the world into our deepest possible wholeness and sovereignty. Essentially, really learning to create a spiritual experience for ourselves here on earth before relationship. This is what I teach in my program, Ravished, for the preparation for the masculine and sacred union, is having to experience this rupture and not try to jump back into another relationship, and actually going through the process of total wholeness and sovereignty, working at a generational level in your body, which is how now as a woman that you're going to come into the embodiment of the archetypal divine feminine codes, who's now trying to match with an archetypal divine masculine who's come into their codes, that when you merge together, that the relationship is this amplified experience of polarity. And it becomes really, really healthy polarity because both of you have sort of counterbalanced the polarity at a generational level in your bodies to move into this space that when you choose each other, it becomes an active choice of discernment, right? One thing I really realized on my path was, the ways that I still related to relationships from my little boy, you know what I mean? Where being a hopeless romantic, being a romantic, being, such a proponent for love in these aspects, the ways that I wasn't fiercely fucking discerning, right? Still looking at the ways that I wasn't fiercely discerning. And so as I went through that rupture, I totally understood the process. And I totally understood why that wasn't sacred union. I wasn't ready for it at that time. But I had to go through that process of that rupture that awoke so much and it shook up so much inside of me that it put me onto the path. So most often we need to have a really significant relationship that doesn't actually work, that puts us on the path of sacred union. And this is what I call the karmic spiritual relationship, which what it does is it shakes up so much generational shit, so much past life material in our body, in our flesh, that we now walk down the path of beginning to heal and move the energy through. This is what truly opens the crown. This is what truly opens the crown. And now you essentially need to go down this path of looking at all the ways that you looked for relationship to save you, all the ways you looked for relationship to deliver you to God, all the ways you looked for relationship to bring you into a spiritual experience. That's what we're looking for in a relationship. We're looking for a spiritual experience. But sacred union is that you've already cultivated a spiritual experience in your body before the union comes, right? But so often we look from a wounded sort of spiritual ego, which is twin flames, all these different dynamics. We look for this relationship from some aspect that is not whole within ourselves. And so typically things like the karmic spiritual relationship and twin flames are activators and igniters of material at a past life and generational realm that needs to be shaken up and moved through our body. And we're essentially going to experience a rupture. This is why twin flames usually don't work out. We need to experience a rupture from sort of this past life generational level, which now begins to open our body to the field of sacred union, where now our crown can finally open. Now our crown can truly open, because all the ways that we lived with a sense of ego, a sense of looking for relationship to deliver us, we're now having to process that in our body. And that's why when you experience this rupture, you guys, everything, it feels like this crazy blank canvas. You're like, fuck, I don't know what anything is anymore. Because you're going to such a recalibration of actually truly learning what the divine and God is. And the place that we actually begin when it comes to moving into the divine and God is that you know nothing. And you come back into this space where you viscerally feel that you know nothing. And you really have this embodied experience of, fuck, everything I thought was one way, it's not true. It's what I call the attachment rupture. It's the massive death of your ego. And sacred union, we need a massive death of our ego relationally. We need a massive death of our ego relationally to prime the body for the process of truly coming into the archetypal codes of the divine feminine, divine masculine. And you need to have this rupture because you're working in such a big paradigm of energy, right? So for example, some people just find their person at 25, they find their person at 30. They're probably not meant to come into these archetypal codes, right? Which is totally fine. It doesn't mean they can't be an extremely powerful human being, but they're probably not meant to move through a certain amount of karma, which is going to do with their soul, the age of their soul, also whatever their soul's incarnation here is on earth. It doesn't mean that can't be a sacred union, but it's going to be, let's say, like a 20% sacred union, meaning sacred union really is when the archetypal codes that you're working in is the amount of energy, the amount of recalibration of energy you're dealing with. A sacred union is a relationship that is dealing with so much energy. So two people that have created a capacity in their body for a certain amount of energy through embodying their own archetypal codes, the divine masculine, divine feminine, either side, coming together and creating an amplification like the holy rapture, which is where as they connect and they combine and they embrace, it becomes this sort of upward swirl in the body that brings us to God and the divine. And there's going to be these unions coming about that are going to continue to open up this new earth and continue to open up and harmonize the balance in the world and the universe, where masculine and feminine energy are trying to be healed at such a deep level. And these really, the deeper the sacred union, the deeper the collective ripple that it has in restoring and harmonizing the woundedness, the separation between the magnetic poles of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, right? And so typically, two people that come into sacred union have had to go down a hell of a journey of their own sort of spiritual path of experiencing this rupture, having their spiritual ego be shattered, having to come into their own sort of embodiment and moving into a path of their own wholeness, so that we can actually combine like this powerful relationship, but from an area of real, like, grounded, practical discernment. Because essentially what we're doing is we're trying to create like an otherworldly relationship in the human flesh, right? And like when I went through the relationship that I thought was sacred union, I was in a relationship where we were accessing crazy amounts of energy, but that relationship was in service as a catalyst. It wasn't end game, but it was a necessary catalyst to shake things up. And so much of sacred union is timing. Everything is timing. And it's about when two people are kind of moving at a similar trajectory. Two people are moving at a similar trajectory on the spiritual path, meaning they're kind of at a similar sort of trajectory of coming into their archetypal codes, right? So two people that are old souls that are really, really meant to go down this path. They're being fully anointed, called by God, fully having to come into the calibration and integration of these codes, and that they're at a similar sort of trajectory. They're at a sort of similar rates of ascension, right? That's what's absolutely necessary for sacred union, because what we learn, and so often what happens in the karmic spiritual relationship, is we're fighting a timeline. Where the human timeline and the spirit timeline are at war. They're not in harmony, right? So sacred union is when your spirit, the sacred timeline, it merges seamlessly with the human timeline. And that's why like a sacred union will feel like total flow, like levity. It will feel like ease. It won't be this situation where you're constantly fighting upstream. It will be, you'll create a new imprint where you don't have to fight so hard to be seen. You're just seen by this person, right? You don't have to fight so hard to be loved, right? You'll just be understood by this person. So there'll be a real sort of soul resonance. And so the spirit timeline and the human timeline will converge, right? That's why timing is literally everything. But often we have to go through an experience where the spirit or sacred timeline is at war with the human timeline. What I mean by that is that you're in a relationship where you're accessing energy from a higher dimension, but your human body's not ready to hold it yet. You have more work to do. You have more purging and clearing to do, more capacity to build in your body and flesh. And so you need to go through this process where there's a timeline separation between the spirit timeline and the human timeline, which creates a rupture. Twin flames are often a timeline separation. They're often where the spirit timeline is fighting the human timeline. So maybe it might mean you have a contract with someone from a past life or in the sort of the quantum field, the generational realm, but it's at war with the human timeline, which is why the relationship is so challenging. That's a karmic relationship. Why it's so hard to make it work. What it essentially means is a higher dimensional timeline can't quite fit into the human timeline. You know, a 24D experience can't fit into a 3D experience. And what that does is it kicks up all your past life shit, all your generational shit, all the deepest sort of karmic contracts. And so when you come into a connection like this, it means that you're being asked to like purge and clear a certain degree and depth of karma and trauma through your body. And then in that rupture is where your spiritual ego gets shattered. And you move back into the space where you learn, okay, I see where I still was out of wholeness within myself. I see I see why that didn't work out. And so like I see perfectly well why this connection that I had was a karmic relationship and it wasn't sacred. I get it completely. Um, I understand it completely from a rational and practical level. Like it all makes perfect sense. And I had to go through that rupture in order to truly, because it brought up a certain amount of stuff. It allowed, it was like a real excavation. It's like, imagine you're like drilling for oil. And so these karmic relationships become like a drilling into the heart of us, into the soul of us, to awaken so much stuff that had to be cleared. And then as that's cleared, your capacity for what you can hold and the paradigm and the energetic field that you occupy is so much larger. Now you're on the path of preparing yourself for sacred union, which is a place where you're both totally energetically sovereign, energetically whole, and you both have really moved into a degree of downloading your archetypal codes. And so both people in this sort of relationship are the divine feminine, divine masculine, have downloaded their archetypal codes, meaning their body is clued into a process where they're accessing feminine energy and masculine energy that's thousands of years old. And they create a collective sort of ripple and collective consciousness with creating these new imprints for what relationships need to be. But it requires us to really believe in magic, but also be so fucking practical. Believe in magic, but be so fucking practical. And for myself, I recognize the ways that I wasn't discerning as I needed to be. I recognize the ways, and I remember when that relationship didn't work out, I was like, went through the rupture, and I was like, oh, God, I get it. I get it. I understand it now. I understand this process completely now. But it requires you to move out into the world from the blankest canvas you've ever experienced. And you're like, I don't know anything anymore. Everything I thought was going to be one way is now a completely different way. And everything feels so wide open. And this is because your attachment system, the ways that we extort a sense of like stability or safety has now been eradicated. And we're now having to extort a sense of safety through trust and faith in God and the process of this divine embodiment and what that looks like, what that feels like. So essentially, we're having to become our own anchor when we can't feel anything in the world but ourselves, right? Think about what happens when people can't feel anything in the world but themselves, right? It's usually where we like race to like another relationship or like we need something. Like we need something. Because if we really, really feel that sort of aloneness in the world, it's terrifying. It's scary. That's where we find God. That's where, when you can tap and anchor into that, that is literally the preparation for sacred union. That is the rite of passage that we have to experience, the rupture, where we can't feel anything in the world but ourselves. Because our attachment system is totally changed. And so what's going to happen, you guys, in this space is you're going to access like the craziest generational fear, the craziest generational grief, everything. Everything that is in the field is now going to have to be digested through your body. And this is why people are going to be activated by material from the ancestral realm during this portal, like the past 2 months and these different portals that come about. How much these portals impact you is probably going to be proportional to how many archetypal codes you're meant to come into in your body, right? So with these portals, if people's bodies like aren't really even feeling anything, it probably means either they're not ready or they're at a spot where they're not able to come into the codes, or they're not really meant to come into those archetypal codes. Get into addiction patterns at that spot in the wide open. That's happening for me 100%. Because in that wide open, and Robin, if you think about it, in that wide open is essentially the place where you try to heal the root of whatever led to those internal separations within yourself, right? Whatever ways we kind of sought comfort or we sought fighting against our own sense of unworthiness is brought up in that wide open. So in that wide open, you know, that space where we can't feel anyone but ourselves, and we're able to internally descend, that is where that heals. That is where the overfunctioner heals. That is where the underfunctioner heals. Whatever drives our sense of unworthiness comes up in the wide open. And so if people are really going through things like depression right now and a massive sense of unworthiness, it's probably because your system is at such a level of exposure in the wide open that literally every sort of coping mechanism your body uses to fight against that space of wide open, which might mean your body's in a shutdown, that you're really, really dysregulating, that everything that fights against those internal separations is going to be right there. It's going to be right there. And that's the piece. Walking the gauntlet of that piece is the preparation for sacred union, because it's about moving into that total wholeness and sovereignty within ourselves. And so that wide open, and you guys, the wide open, I mentioned, you experience a rupture where you thought things were going to be one way. All of a sudden, it's like you're grieving a past timeline. It's like you're grieving an ancient timeline in your body. It's like you're here on earth and you're grieving something from a past life or something from the generational realm that you don't even have a conscious memory of, but you're grieving and moving and digesting and processing some ancient sort of timeline through your body. And in doing that, it's going to bring you into a space of the field is so wide open. Everything is so unclear. That's where God actually comes. But guys, think about it. How many people don't really, really, truly have to go through that process? You know what I mean? They don't truly have to endure that process. And most people in the spiritual industry that talk about union haven't really gone through the process in the way that I'm talking about it here. This is, and what I feel, and it doesn't mean people out there aren't talking about union, and there are sacred unions out there. There are lots of people who are tapped into this process I'm talking about, and more people are coming into this process. But the depth in which I'm talking about is very sort of cutting edge. It is very sort of at the forefront, where people with really, really old souls who are really called into archetypal codes, meaning people's souls who are probably here since like really early on in the creation of Earth, and have very strong archetypal feminine or masculine energy, are having to go through these processes to come into their codes to now lead sort of a cutting edge wave energy of the depth of this sacred union, which means that we have to heal that deepest unworthiness, which is Robin was talking about there. It feels like the wide open. You're like, I don't know where to latch onto. I don't know where to latch onto. Right. And most people in that space are like, fuck, like I'm going to date, or, you know what I mean? Or I'm just going to like, sleep with people, or I'm just going to like do whatever we can to avoid that space. Cause I get how uncomfortable it is, but you guys, that's really at the forefront right now. What's been happening in the past 2 months. If we're really someone who's called these archetypal codes, we're really going to be feeling it in our body right now, because all this sort of generational energy has been brought up and brought to the surface so that we can get closer, right? So it's kind of like a timeline jump or a new paradigm, because all the deepest layers of the density, the unworthiness, the darkness are trying to be transmuted so that we can move into more of a purification with source and God. And we're more purely connected to that energy, which means being more exposed in that wide open where we don't know what's happening. We don't have anything to cling on to, right? So often for most relationships, why most relationships are not true love is because attachment is way greater than actual true love, right? Think about how many relationships where so much of the relationship is just attachment, right? And so this process I'm talking about is basically looking at where is attachment stronger than love. That's essentially what this process is. Because sacred union is where you've really moved through some of your deepest attachment wounds to now go into a place of actively discerning and actively choosing this relationship as an amplification, right? So it's an amplification of wholeness, not a completion of wholeness. And so right now in this sort of portal, right, people who can really, really sit in this unworthiness are people who are being primed for a sacred union timeline. We are being primed and we are being prepared for a sacred union timeline. but we have to be able to sit and endure. And that's why right now, guys, all your different coping mechanisms will be coming up right now, and you need to be gentle with yourself, because how gnarly the energy in your body is going to be. It's so fucking challenging. It's some of the most challenging feelings that you will experience at such like a deeply gnarly energy. And I've been feeling it too, how challenging it is. Past 2 months have been its own acute initiation in and of itself. And I just know that it's like the heart of all the generational trauma and karma is like so deeply being digested through the body, so that we can move more into a deep purification with source. And so a lot of what's trying to happen is our unhealthy relational patterns are kind of coming up, ways of relating that aren't working. And so again, it becomes more of a call to wholeness of, what do I need to do to move into a healthier preparation relationally for my eventual sacred union? Whether that means, getting back with a past partner in a new iteration, or with someone new, whatever it might be. We're having to really kind of move into this act of discernment within ourselves of which is why certain connections will be falling away and certain connections will come together. Literally just found the one, love my life, and the mirror to my attachments and unwilling past is so strong. I like it. Yeah, like what I feel like is going to happen right now, you guys, is that a lot of like karmic contracts are going to be called to be completed. And this is also, maybe not just yet, but I feel coming into a lot of people are going to begin to meet their person. I don't know the timeline for that, but kind of this collapse that's happening right now, I think we're going to be completing a lot of things that are contracts that are more karmic. You guys see the orbs above my head? Fucking, they've been going off, gang. But so we're going to be completing a lot of these contracts, and so people are going to begin to move into meeting their sacred union, sort of divine counterpart here as we move along into the future. And this particular portal for the past 2 months is a big extraction of a lot of pieces that were standing in the way of the sacred union timeline. Because that unworthiness within us is where we lack the sovereignty and wholeness, right? And so also, guys, if you're having a hard time being productive right now, don't feel bad about yourself, because it's such a big internal digestion that when you really allow this to digest and your body begins to tune into it, you're really, areas where you had felt held back before, you're really going to be able to move forward. Like areas that you've been held back, you're really, really going to be able to move forward. Once this digests in your body, areas that you were really, really held back, you're going to be able to begin to move forward. And so, as I mentioned, relationally, it's a lot of maybe completion conversations, a lot of completing of these contracts, which is going to bring up so much fear, which is going to bring up so much unworthiness, because as you complete these contracts, you know what it does, guys. And the reason why we don't complete contracts is out of fear, right? Because when you complete a contract, it frees up so much energy, right? Think about when we don't complete a contract, the energy is just, it's chaotic, right? But when you complete a contract karmically, the energy now, it comes to you. And now that becomes a transmutation of the divine in God. When you complete that karmic energy, now that energy comes back into the body, and it can become a divine exchange. And so this is why, again, I think we're going to be healing a lot of deep generational relational patterns, a lot of collective wounding with the masculine and feminine, a lot of ways in our life where our deepest unworthiness was getting in the way of us taking action or executing with certain things in our life is now going to be freed up in this space. But we are in this sort of digestion period, right? Which is basically, there's so much energy that our body can't digest it all at once, which is why there's a lot of nervous system dysregulation, a lot of shutdown, a lot of fear, a lot of grief, depression, self-loathing, shame, guilt, heaviness, density, feeling disconnected to God, feeling disconnected to the divine, all our deepest coping mechanisms, because that core unworthiness, not only our lifetime, but the generational lifetimes, are being brought up now, and we're being asked to digest and move through it so that we can move into this sort of clearing, right? Which is where a lot of people are going to be moving on to like a sacred union timeline after this portal. But it depends on the readiness of our body and vessel, and also just how we work through this period, meaning like really, really kind of trusting the calls right now, trusting the areas that you're being guided and directed with your energy, people that you're being called towards for whatever reason, moving towards those connections you're being asked to wrap up. Really tuning into that vibration is really going to prepare your body and your vessel for more of your soul's highest timeline. And our soul's highest timeline is the sacred union timeline. So the sacred union timeline really is the soul's highest timeline. And that's why we experience a karmic relationship. We're essentially experiencing a powerful spiritual connection before we're ready to hold the higher self in the body. And so that's why it's timing. Timing is everything. And sacred union, the reason why sacred union will feel effortlessly like ease is because of the timing. Because the spirit timeline and the human timeline are converging completely. And so what it really means is this divine magical experience, but it's really practical. It's really like of the earth. And you're not having to fight these sort of three-dimensional things, which is why in like a twin flame, there's usually so much ground that we have to cover to be together. Look at the fucking orbs. There's so much ground that we have to cover to be together. That's why twin flame, and that's because it's a timeline separation. The spirit timeline and the human timeline are in conflict. Sacred union is when the spirit timeline and the human timeline come together in total synchronicity. And so what happens when you do experience these ruptures, you recognize the work that was still needed. Oh, okay, I understand why I wasn't truly embodied in my archetypal codes yet, why I wasn't truly embodied in the divine yet. I understand why this wasn't supposed to work out. And if you're someone who's really, really called to the divine, it's going to be a hell of a process you're going to have to go through. So be gentle with yourself. Why is it taking me so long? Why have I had so many of these difficult relationships, unhealthy relationships, these relationships that were challenging? It's because it's a level of karma that your body's having to integrate. And not everyone has an experience on earth where they have to complete so much karma. But if we're someone who's spiritually called, we're going to have to complete a lot of karma here on earth. And that's the grist, the gestation that creates a spiritual experience. And I know for myself, like why I was called to be a spiritual teacher, because there's so many karmic lessons that I was meant to learn here on earth, and relationally too. So many fucking lessons that I was meant to learn, which is the fodder and the creation of wisdom and being able to have an understanding and embodiment and integration of things, because you just more and more things begin to sync up and you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the process. And so these sacred union relationships and these sort of unions that are going to come through are really going to be at the deepest possible level. And this is why the divine feminine is feminine energy working in ancient energy. The divine masculine is masculine energy working in ancient energy. Sacred union is when each person is probably accessing thousands of years worth of archetypal energy in their body. And when they come together, it creates this amplification, this restoration, recalibration of masculine and feminine energy in such an ancient capacity. And that's why the collective ripple of these relationships is so potent, so fucking powerful. And it does require us to go down this path of healing all the ancient karma of our ancestors and all the imbalances between the masculine and feminine in our lineage through our flesh. And so that's a big part of what this portal has been about, you guys, that we are being primed and prepped for a sacred union timeline. But we're really in such an activation of this unworthiness right now, and healing so many imbalances in the body that is trying to clear the field so that we can both as an individual move into our soul's highest timeline and to prepare and prime our vessel to be able to hold the container for a sacred union. So I think I'm going to leave it there, guys. Perfectly an hour. Some questions here. Been seeing the orbs. Happy to hear that, man. We're in the down part of the wave, building the power to come up. Exactly. We're kind of at a like the boomerang, but it hasn't come back yet. You know what I mean? Like a whale's gonna breach, but it's underwater right now. It's been a big contraction, guys, the past 2 months, and fuck, these orbs are going off. Damn. Um, but our bodies had, like, just judging by what I felt in my body, is that there's been minor reprieves, but then more energy comes. So it's been so relentless right now that it's kind of like you haven't been able to come up for air, is what it feels like. So it's like you move through a piece, you're like, oh, okay, but then there's another piece. And so that's what it's been like in my experience, which has been challenging and frustrating because it's been so relentless. But you just have to have the faith um, of like just how much digging is happening right now, just how much excavation is happening. And it's rapid cycling. Yeah, it's a relentless process that just won't seem to leave you alone right now. And so if you are feeling that, it really means your body is sort of clued into and keyed up to this process that's happening. Um, just completed the loop myself. That's amazing, Patrice. Love to hear that, man. Probably why you had someone come into your field, a romantic prospect or partner. And yeah, if you're still going through the process, it means there's things your system's working out, but we have to really trust our body and our system are working out these pieces. They are doing exactly what it knows how to do and preparing us for this. And yeah, guys, this is very like this process is really exciting. What I sort of see out there is like more and more people are coming attuned to this. And what it feels like is there's quite a few people are tapped into this, but not to the full extent, is what I feel like. I feel like people tapped into this process to the full extent is such a small microcosm of the spiritual space, like 1%, really. You know what I mean? At the depth that I'm talking about here, it really, really, it is beginning to permeate the consciousness, but not at the depth really that we're talking about here, because this is a pretty fucking gnarly, like big process. But this, people are more and more kind of coming into this, and with what's happened in this portal the past 2 months, with people experiencing what they are, it is permeating more and more people, and people are beginning to kind of open themselves to this paradigm more and more. It is permeating consciousness. But most people who talk about union are probably only talking about like a small portion of the extent of the depth that I'm talking about here. Doesn't mean like they're not in a union, but it depends on their soul's incarnation, what their soul's here to do, and the amount of archetypal codes that their body's being clued into. And so, yeah, really, really interesting. It's really exciting. It's one of those things, like for me, it's for years of like having this feeling that something is coming, something is coming, something is coming. Just in this form of consciousness and just this evolution of like human awakening. Really fucking fascinating shit. And I'm really looking forward to seeing over the next few years how all this plays out and what ends up happening. Like, I think I know what's going to happen, but seeing that unfold and yeah, it's really fucking wild. So, all right, guys, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning into this video, for your interaction here in the comment section. I appreciate it. If you guys resonate with this, give the video a like. If you don't mind, send it to someone who might connect with it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, you guys. And yeah, post your comments, anything that stuck out to you, anything you're curious and interested about. Look at these fucking orbs. Look at that shit, you guys. It means my crown is so fucking open. Look at those orbs. Look at that, eh? My crown. Whew. There we go. I love it. All right, everyone. Wish you guys a great week, you guys. And we'll see you guys on Friday in the next live. Much love, everyone.